One basic rule of survival is that when a clearly deranged individual is ranting and raving in public, you shouldn't engage with them. Generally speaking, there's no benefit to doing so. You can't persuade them not to be delusional as much as you might like to. You can only make things worse. Unfortunately, every now and then, despite your best efforts, sometimes this strategy doesn't work out. You know, we've all been there. You're trying to mind your own business. Out of nowhere, you catch a stranger's eye and they start talking to you or about you. They might verbalize their unhinged delusions about who you are or what you do for a living. And in those cases, sometimes it can be impossible to resist saying a word or two in response. You know, it's not going to help anything. You know, you probably shouldn't do it, but it's human nature to respond when someone, even a lunatic, is talking about you. And last night, I found myself in a situation just like that when the Kamala HQ account on Twitter, which is the official account of the Kamala Harris campaign, posted a message in response to a segment from my show yesterday. This is the same account that even CNN reports is guilty of repeatedly deceiving, their words, people with obviously false posts. It's the same account that Tim Pool is suing because they wildly misrepresented something that he said on his show. They are pathological, delusional liars in every sense. And last night, totally unprovoked, they came after me. And here's what they wrote in response to my show yesterday. Quote, "Top Trump operative echoing Project 2025. Not only should the Department of Education be abolished, but the entire public school system should be abolished." Now, before I play the clip that they embedded in that tweet, I have to say a few things. First of all, it would be news to the Trump campaign that I'm one of their operatives. I don't work for the Trump campaign, by the way. I don't coordinate with the Trump campaign. I've never spoken to the Trump campaign at any point. During the primary, I supported Ron DeSantis, as most people know. So in no sense am I a Trump campaign operative, though I am a supporter and I'm going to vote for him. At the same time, I have to admit that this lie is a little flattering. I mean, if they're going to falsely label me a Trump operative, I'm glad they promoted me to a top operative instead of just a regular one, at least. I'm not some rank and file Trump operative over here. I'm the cream of the crop in the eyes of the Kamala Harris campaign. So it's nice to be getting some damned respect around here, finally, I have to say. But in any event, here's the footage they embedded in their tweet to demonstrate that I'm a top Trump operative who is echoing Project 2025. I'm responding here to a clip from a recent Trump rally where he says the education system is failing in this country, and he says that he wants to abolish the Department of Education, and I very much agree with that. And so here's the short clip from my show yesterday that they posted. Here it is. And that's because our education system is a catastrophic failure. And it's such a failure that it has created a civilization-level crisis. It's a crisis that cannot be entirely fixed by abolishing the Department of Education because you're still going to have the public school system that will still exist. And ultimately, the public school system itself needs to be abolished. The whole thing, the entire system should be dismantled. A couple of things just off the top. First of all, I look pretty good in the jacket, you have to say. I've gone full Hollywood now, you know, in the movies, and now I'm wearing the jacket, the whole thing. Total diva now, I guess. And second, I wish they had kept it going, because actually I go on in that clip to say that I want to burn the public school system to the ground, metaphorically, and dance around its ashes like a wild Indian. I say that I didn't say the wild Indian part, but I'm saying that part now. And they could have included that. I don't know why they didn't. But anyway, like everything else that this Kamala HQ account has uploaded in the past few weeks, this post backfired almost immediately. Pretty much every reply was along the lines of, yep, the public school system, the Department of Education are terrible and should be abolished. The goal of the Kamala Harris campaign is, of course, to portray this as an inherently extreme position, as if the existence of the Department of Education is some sort of inevitable fact of life in this country, but it's not. For most of this country's history, up until 1979, we did not have a Department of Education at all. Actually, to be more precise, Andrew Johnson also launched a Department of Education back in 1867. It had just 4 employees, the commissioner and 3 clerks, very limited mandate. It was supposed to collect statistics on the condition and progress of education in the United States and then publish that information. But even with that limited mandate, politicians at the time thought the Department of Education had too much power. They didn't see any reason for the department to exist at all. As Politico reports, many in Congress saw its existence as an unconstitutional power grab and worried that its data-gathering authority gave Washington a new and dangerous kind of leverage. Andrew Rogers, a Democrat from New Jersey, put it this way, quote, "I am content to leave this matter of education where our fathers left it, where the history of our country left it, in the school systems of the different towns, cities, and states." So ultimately, the first Department of Education lasted just a year before Congress realized it was a horrible idea and abolished it. Instead of having a bloated and unnecessary federal bureaucracy spending tens of billions of dollars every year, education mostly remained a local concern from 1868 to 1979. And all told, we did pretty well as a country in that period. In fact, during that time frame, we went from horses to cars to planes to rocket ships flying to the moon. And we won 2 world wars, in our spare time. It was a period of human advancement in this country never seen before. And we did it all without the Department of Education, if you can imagine. Then in 1979, after this period of uninterrupted prosperity and innovation, Jimmy Carter revived the federal Department of Education. And by that point, we didn't have a lot of politicians in Washington anymore who wanted to limit their own power. Instead, they wanted to expand it at all costs. So the DOE has stuck around to disastrous results. And the New York Sun reported last year, quote, "The recent report by the National Assessment of Educational Progress, sometimes referred to as the nation's report card, is a devastating assessment of the condition of our nation's schools. In short, there has been virtually no educational progress with our nation's children in more than 30 years, and urban districts are the worst performers. Virtually every major city shows declining proficiency for their students, even as school spending continues to increase." Yes, you heard that correctly. There has been virtually no educational progress in this country, in the education system, in more than 3 decades. The Department of Education has been around this entire time, getting billions and billions of dollars in funding every year, and it has not done anything to improve education. They've hired a bunch of LGBTQ overseers to police misgendering in kindergarten or whatever, but when it comes to education, it's been a debacle. Instead, in major school districts all over the country, corruption has flourished. Quoting again from the Sun, the report ranked the Detroit Public Schools as the worst performing of all 26 large school districts, with just 5% of their 8th grade students rated proficient in reading and only 3% in math. What's surprising is the Detroit Public Schools Community District rated 99% of Detroit's teachers as highly effective or effective, the 2 highest ratings given to teachers. An added conundrum is that the Detroit public high schools received an F on student proficiency and yet received an A on graduation rates. In other words, students are doing terribly, worse than they've done in decades. They're still being filtered through the school system and graduated, and the teachers are rating themselves very highly. They can't even get their 8th grade students to read, and yet they're giving themselves an A+++ for performance. Graduating all these students who can't read, can't write, can't do arithmetic. And despite all this, billions of dollars from the federal government flow into Michigan schools every year. So the Department of Education isn't just tolerating failure, it is enabling it, funding it, facilitating it. Now, to be clear, the source for these claims is not Project 2025. It's not me either. The source for these claims is the Department of Education itself. The National Assessment of Educational Progress, or the nation's report card, is both overseen and administered by the National Center for Education Statistics. And the National Center for Education Statistics is embedded within the U.S. Department of Education. So the Department of Education itself is saying that it is doing a terrible job. They're acknowledging that public schools are failing, which is why homeschooling, by the way, is now more popular than ever. If you want the real indictment on the public school system, it's that homeschooling is taking off and growing year over year. So how bad are things in public schools exactly? The New York Times reported in 2023 that, quote, "The math and reading performance of 13-year-olds in the U.S. has hit the lowest level in decades." Again, their source is the Department of Education and the exam from the National Report Card. And there are reasons to believe that these numbers from the National Report Card, because, quote, Scores on the exam do not result in any rewards or punishments for students, teachers, or schools, making them especially useful for research purposes since there are fewer incentives to cheat or teach to the test. If there were punishments for underperforming schools, then we can assume that a lot of teachers would give their students the answers, but apparently they're not clever enough to do that, at least not yet, so the corruption and incompetence are just laid bare. Out of curiosity, I just pulled up the homepage for the National Report Card. The very first thing on the website is a chart entitled Student Performance Across Subjects. It shows changes in average scores and scores at selective percentiles by subject and grade. And here's what it looks like. You can look at it here. And as you can see, every single arrow, except one, is down, meaning there's been a significant decrease compared to last assessment year, according to the website. Average scores in math and reading are down for grades 4 through 8 in every percentile. The only exception is the 90th percentile in reading among fourth graders, and that experienced no significant difference year over year. So not a single category has improved. Now, I could go on and on about the various metrics that show our public school system and the Department of Education are both failing. Every single statistic like this is clear evidence that we need to scrap the system and start over. But the failures actually go even deeper than test scores and academic proficiency. All the way back in 2004, again citing the Department of Education itself, they released a comprehensive report that we've talked about plenty of times on this show before, showing that 10% of students in public schools nationwide in grades K through 12 were subject to sexual misconduct by a school employee. That's millions of children being sexually victimized in the school, according to the DOE itself. Now, that's the kind of report that was done 20 years ago. You'd expect that would lead to annual, if not monthly, follow-ups by the Department of Education. But as far as I can tell, they haven't followed up at all with any more comprehensive assessments about this. So they discovered that millions of kids are being victimized in school, and they said, okay, well, so now we know, moving on. And as I discussed earlier this year, that's not because sexual abuse in public schools has gone away. If anything, there are clear indications it's become substantially more common, and that public schools are covering it up. So put it all together, and it's evident that the education system is catastrophically failing to do the single thing it is supposed to do, which is to equip each new generation with the knowledge and intellectual tools they need to be productive and happy and well-adjusted human beings. The failure of the education system should be considered a major scandal. It's the greatest scandal facing the country today. But the problem is that the Democrats don't consider failure to be failure, because what they actually want is the education system to churn out shallow, stupid, obedient serfs. And it is indeed, it's succeeding in doing just that. All that said, I'd be remiss if I didn't acknowledge that there's one thing that the Kamala HQ account tweeted about me that is in fact accurate. It is true that I am indeed a proponent of Project 2025, as they said. So they got me there. And in fact, if you want to find out more about our dastardly, secretive plot, now that we've been unmasked for all the world to see, you can find out at project2025.com. And, you know, I shouldn't just give out the URL like that, I know, but because it's such a big secret. But as a top Trump operative, as opposed to a middle manager in the Trump organization, I do have declassification authority. So I can tell you that the website to learn all about it is project2025.com. Of course, send that to all your friends. But whatever you do, do not send this to Kamala HQ account. Do not start peppering their comments with links to project2025.com. Don't troll them incessantly by constantly putting the link to project2025.com. We don't want them to see what we're really up to over here in the Trump campaign. It'd be really, really bad if they tweeted out that link and exposed what we Trump operatives are doing. We can't let them know about project2025.com, but everybody else, everybody on our side wants access to our secret blueprint, can go over to project2025.com anytime they want, read it, internalize it. And then when the Department of Education is abolished and children can once again read, write, and do arithmetic in this country, we must never speak about our sinister Project 2025 plan ever again. Thanks for checking out this video. If you'd like to listen to my full podcast on the go, you can check out The Matt Walsh Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts.